The Pontic-Caspian steppe in the first millennium BC was a remarkable melting pot of different people. Underlying it all was the culture of the indigenous population, who during the second millennium BC had developed a pastoral lifestyle, supported by grain growing wherever the local conditions allowed. It was into this comparatively tranquil landscape that the bands of nomadic horsemen rode, coming from the Central Asian steppe in waves: Cimmerians in the 9th century, Scythians in the 7th century, Sauromatai in the 5th century, and Roxolani in the 2nd century. It was actually the Cimmerians who were the first to migrate to the Pontic-Steppe and the one to start a series of migrations that were to follow after them. By the time Scythians arrived in the steppe, the Cimmerians had already established themselves as a dominant power in the region. As Scythians began to arrive in several waves in the 8th and 7th centuries, social tension began to develop, and the clash between these two groups was inevitable. As a result of the conflict, the Cimmerians were defeated, and the Scythians assimilated most of the culture and displaced the rest. Simply put, it was a time of turmoil in the Pontic-Steppe. In case you are not familiar with the Scythians, let me introduce you to them. Scythians were fearsome and mysterious people, who roamed the vast windswept plains of ancient Eurasia, whose very name struck terror into the hearts of their enemies. The Scythians, masters of the horse and the bow. These nomadic warriors swept across the steppe like a storm, leaving destruction and chaos in their wake. With their long hair and fierce tattoos, they seemed like something out of myths or legends, a primary force of nature unleashed upon the world. To the Greeks, the Scythians were northern barbarians, with bizarre and bloodthirsty customs. In awe of Scythians on the back of horses, fighting with their bows and arrows, the Greeks coined a new word: the horse archers, to describe them. At one with their horses and bows, the Scythians might have reminded the Greeks of centaurs, a creature out of their own mythology. To better understand the history of Eurasia, it is very important to know its landscape, as it has its own peculiar way of shaping history. The land of the Scythians, that intense grass steppe molded by wind and weather, is described by most foreigners as being dreary and depressingly monotonous, with its uniformity of appearance. It is the largest expanse of temperate grassland in the world, stretching in an almost continuous swathe from Manchuria in the east to the Great Hungarian Plain in the west, a distance of about 8,000 kilometers. Toward the south, the vegetation gradually thins, giving way to the desert steppe, beyond which is open desert. Forest steppe to the north eventually gives way to forest proper, as the density of trees keeps on increasing towards the north. The western steppe is moister and warmer than the regions further east, their pastures accordingly being lusher. This creates what is known as the steppe gradient. As one travels from the east to the west, the climate changes from cold and dry to warm and damp, and hence the west being a favorable destination for all the nomads living on the steppe. And this may be one of the reasons why Scythians started migrating from Central Asia toward the west into the Pontic-Steppe. The exact reason for their migration toward the west is still unknown. Could it be the result of population pressure in the Central Asian steppe, building up like a volcano and erupting from time to time? Or is it the effect of climate change drawing people towards the west? Maybe it is the combination of all these factors. But Herodotus of Halicarnassus, writing in the 5th century BC, out of all these factors, chose to put his faith on Scythians being driven out by the Masagatai, another group of nomadic people living in Central Asia, closely related to Scythians. So, according to Herodotus, it was the result of political instability that they migrated toward the west. One of the earliest incoming groups of Scythians settled in the North Caucasus, with a concentration in the valley of the river Kuban. Some may have continued toward the Great Pontic-Steppe, but at first, their numbers were limited, and it was not until the late 8th and early 7th century BC, partially because of new people coming in, and partially because of groups moving westward from the North Caucasus, that steppe began to be occupied in that scale. When the Scythians first began arriving, the Cimmerians, in the face of the Scythian threat, were in discord. The royal tribe wanted to stay and fight, but the rest of the people thought it best to leave. Disagreement between the two classes led to a civil conflict, in which the royal tribe was defeated and was slain. Then the rest of the Cimmerians departed, and the Scythians on their arrival took possession of the deserted land. Herodotus, looking back on these events, reminded his readers that there were still traces of the Cimmerians to be seen in the region previously occupied by them. He further adds that they fled into Asia Minor, keeping to a route that led along the seashore, and at least some of the survivors made their way eastwards, at first along the Black Sea coast, and then following the coastal route into Asia Minor, maybe to seize new lands, or to find employment as mercenaries in the struggle being played out in the region. They finally reached Asia Minor and settled on the peninsula of Sinope. When the Scythians swept in, some chose to occupy land previously settled by the Cimmerians, while others, moving along the western shore of the Caspian Sea, around the eastern end of the Caucasus, took up residence in the land of the Medes, on the border of the Assyrian Empire. A highly fertile pasture lands around Lake Urmia, land ideal for maintaining the large herds of horses, on which they were entirely dependent. And from here they became involved in the political upheavals in the states of Asia Minor. Thereafter, those identified as Cimmerian and Scythians remained active in Asia Minor until about 630 BC, but they kept to separate spheres, and there is no record of them ever coming into confrontation. The Scythians, who remained north of the Caucasus Mountains, set the Caucasian Steppe as their base of operation, from where they began to conquer the Pontic-Steppe to the north of the Black Sea, up to the Danube River, which formed their western boundary. Those Scythians occupying the Pontic-Steppe had direct access to the two things they needed most: grain from the forest steppe, and a supply of exotic luxury goods from the Greek world. Already well-populated farming communities in the forest steppe to their north were producing a range of desirable commodities including iron, charcoal, furs, honey, slaves, as well as grain. And to the south along the Black Sea coast were the Greek colonial establishments, eager to obtain raw materials and manpower for themselves, and for export to their motherland. In return, they provided many finished goods like wines, potteries, exotic jewelries, and many more. The Carpathian Mountains to the west were a natural barrier to the advance of the Scythians into Central Europe. But the steppe nomads who were curious enough to explore the west might have crossed the Carpathian Mountains. There were several possible routes between the Pontic-Steppe and the west. However, the suggestion that Scythians made a journey past the Carpathian Mountains is based entirely on archaeological evidence, and there are no historical sources to support this. And it could be that these Scythian material found west of the Carpathian Mountains could be the result of trade and exchange or of periodic raids, and hence these materials do not necessarily indicate the presence of Scythians in the region. At the time, when ethnic dislocation of the Cimmerians was being played out in the 8th century BC, the Greeks from the Aegean world were already beginning to make a regular journey into the Black Sea. Stories of strange people who lived in the lands of mists on the north shores of the sea were already circulating in the Greek world. To the Greeks they were barbarians and aliens, and very different from what they were accustomed to. Yet the others, by their very nature, were worthy of their attention. They commanded valuable resources such as gold, tin, furs, and horses, and they had worthwhile skills. The ability to use the bows and to fight in close formation on horseback might have caught the Greeks off guard. The skill that they could hire and use it to their advantage. Little did the Greeks know that these northern barbarians with strange looks and culture, some of which they even despised, were soon to become their close neighbors and a very reliable trade partners. The Greeks and Scythians would later grow on to appreciate each other, which would turn out to be very beneficial for both the Greeks and the Scythians' world. But this is not the end of the story. The Scythians have just established themselves. Their expansion and the battles that they fought, which gave them the name they are known for, are still yet to come. In their golden age, the Scythians even went as far as Egypt, from where they turned back and returned. Well, their expansion is a topic for another whole video. And I hope to see you soon on the next one. If you enjoyed the video, then don't forget to hit the like button and subscribe to our channel. And thanks for watching.